People who have been to a wedding where someone objected to the marriage, what was their reason? The wife objected because she had shorty found out her soon-to-be husband had been sleeping with her sister for the past 8 years despite the two of them having 2 kids. Dang, that's even worse. What kind of sister does that? Probably does not count but still worth mentioning. Wedding. Jewish. Final moments, and once the marriage was final, the bride straight up runs to the crowd and says, "I'm divorcing my husband for sleeping with my sister." Bride found out about the cheating but was smart and got back at her sister worse than ever. Forgive my lack of Jewish knowledge, but we found out that something in the Jewish faith, once you're married, the bride or groom cannot marry or remarry someone related to the previous wife or something like that. So this bride not only publicly humiliated him but sister by outing them, but sealed the fact that they can never ever be together. Wow, that's the proudest and bravest revenge. At my half sister's wedding, when they got to the objection part, of her mother, same dad different mum, leant across to another family member and whispered, "Yeah, he isn't good enough for her." The officant stopped the wedding and asked her to speak up, saying it's a legal part to the wedding and if she has an objection then please state it loud enough to hear. Sister's mum laughed it off and sat down red-faced, while I glared evils into the back of this woman's head. My sister is awesome and the guy she's with makes her super happy. Bonus awkward points. In his speech he thanked sister's mother for accepting him onto the family and how happy he was to have another mum. Both his parents have died. Oof from me. Yikes. Hope your sister's happy. Not quite objected, but I went to a wedding where the bride got smashed before the ceremony and couldn't say her vows, had to go have a nap and miss the reception. It's very weird to me how drunk people will get at their own wedding. I would want to remember every moment of my expensive butt party. I was at one of my good friend's wedding. She was marrying a man she thought was a truck driver. And when the priest says, "Does anyone object?" this woman stands up and says, "I do." Turns out the guy wasn't a truck driver but was a married man from Florida who had 2 kids and the woman was his wife. Holy crap, an actual legal reason. I wasn't there, but an old friend told me about a wedding he attended years ago. When it came time for the objection part, a voice in the back yells, "She sucked my dong like 30 minutes ago." Bride bursts into tears. Groom just walks away. That blows. Went to a wedding. Everything seems to be going well. Groom felt up the 18-year-old niece. Mob finds out while bride and groom are at altar and things went to crap pretty soon after. My good friend's wedding video is awesome. A big thunderstorm blew up during the ceremony, and just as the minister asked, "Does anybody have any objections?" lightning strikes the church with a tremendous kaboom and all the lights go out. There's some nervous laughter, and the minister says that doesn't count, and the ceremony continued. God is jealous. The groom's father objected and said that he couldn't just stand by and watch because he had proof that she was just using him so she could pay off her debts. From what I heard, a person in her group chat got into a big fight with her on the day of the wedding and ended up sending the groom's father a bunch of screenshots of the bride admitting that she was planning on divorcing him after he paid off all her student debts and bought a house so that she could get it in a divorce. The bride tried to deny it, but I guess the groom had suspicions that she was just using him, and after he saw the proof he called the wedding off. My friend, who invited me as her +1, was super embarrassed, but I was thoroughly entertained. I would imagine this is the equivalent of watching a reality show. All the drama, none of the involvement. Just need some popcorn. The bride was banging this dude at the time of her marriage, not the groom BTW, and then someone ended up objecting. The guy she was fricking, and said, "She has been fricking me, that cow, and she is better off with me." The groom dumped her after that, and then everyone in my province knows her, so no one wants her, so she moved province. Her breakdown at the wedding was priceless. I was at a friend's wedding when his mother got up during the vows and said objection. Everyone stared at her in confusion while she stood there staring at his soon-to-be wife. His mother then proceeded to say, "I don't want my baby being with that rat bastardy for the rest of his life." Everyone just kind of sat there looking confused and shocked. Her son, my friend, looked at her with a beet red face and ran out of the church we were in. I guess he felt the same way but didn't want to agree. Long story short, the bride ended up calling the wedding off and they broke up. Didn't get a slice of cake. Good times. Was the bride a bad person though? Fun fact, in France the religious ceremony has no value, and the legal wedding is performed in a short ceremony by the mayor, typically the same day, in the morning, then everyone rushes to the religious one. This ceremony is public, and as such the doors must be opened so that anyone with a valid legal motive can interrupt. Sneakily closing the doors can get the marriage annulled. This is similar to the rule in the UK and possibly elsewhere, too, where any marriage in a church has to be open to the public, because any official service has to be public. Not an objection, but had a drunk guy friend tell me, the bride, to give him a call when things didn't work out. Obviously cut him out of my circle. He called me a few years later, a week before his own wedding, and asked if I was still happy. My husband and I just celebrated 15 years together and look forward to many more. Whoa, hitting on the bride, that there's a player. A guy had been molesting some of the girls from the school where he was the after-school activity program director. The bride has a daughter herself and knew about some of the allegations but decided to marry him anyway, out of state. Well, some of us were still invited, and unbeknownst to her a woman barges in cussing up a storm because her daughter is one of the ones that he molested really bad and she's in counseling because of it and he got off free. Was a full out brawl. Intruder lady and a few others were arrested, and that was the end of that wedding. She ran off somewhere and I guess cried for the remainder of the evening, and her family asked everyone to leave. She still married him but eloped somewhere private and posted pictures on Facebook. Didn't know the couple as I was the musician for the ceremony, but had someone object because he was a Spurs fan and the groom was a Liverpool fan, still feeling from the 1st of June. Lomfeo. We didn't object, but it was hard to keep our mouths shut at my aunt's wedding. She'd had a hard life. Her 2 daughters were mentally disabled to the point where they had to live in a care facility full time. They'll never progress beyond toddlerhood but are in their 30s. Her first husband abused the girls and then killed himself. The only bright side was that he left her millions in real estate. Her second serious partner left her, and she was lonely as heck. She lectured and was a smart lady, with a PhD, but somehow fell for this con man. He's a bad dude. He was after her money, which was supposed to be for the future care of the girls. He wasn't allowed back in several countries because he had conned people out of so much money, and there was something very wrong with him mentally. He claimed to be able to cure cancer and took cancer patients' money and would stay in hotels then leave without paying. He'd steal credit cards from people, etc. Anyhow, we were invited to the wedding. We'd found out about his issues, but he had convinced my aunt that it was all lies and the world was against him. We struggled so hard to be there for her that day, but we needed her to know that we were on her side, as he had already started to poison her mind with allegations that her family weren't good for her. Soon he had her totally under his control and none of us were allowed to speak to her. We were pretty worried, but couldn't do anything. Eventually, after about 5 years, he blew through most of her money. They did IVF and had a son, who is now 8. Her husband left when the money was gone, and she got a bit wise to his lies. So now she's nearly 60, raising a child, and trying to rebuild bridges with her family and friends. Kinda wish we had objected at the wedding, but she was set on her path. And other people like her parents had told her all the bad stuff they had found out about her husband, and it hadn't stopped her. Figured all we could do was be there for her. You shouldn't blame yourself for not objecting at the wedding. That probably would have only driven you further apart. I hope she's doing better now. At my cousin bride's wedding, one of the groomsmen spent the entire ceremony facing the audience, with his back to the bride. He felt that my cousin was an overly judgmental succubus who would nag and belittle him. He was absolutely right. Not the wedding but the rehearsal. Bill's Krasisex somehow finds the location but mistook the date. Started her insaneness by stating she forgave him for breaking up with her and he seriously needed to stop trying to act like he moved on. Him and my sister had been together for a couple of years and had been living together for at least 2. Like B, I'm pretty sure he ain't faking it. Then decided to claim she was pregnant with his child. Bill proceeded to tell her that she was his greatest mistake and that if she was pregnant it was probably her stepfather's, just like the last one she claimed was his, and aborted without telling him. Me and the best man kindly kept her away from the couple while the friend who owned the house the wedding was taking place at called the police because she was refusing to leave her property. My husband and I got married when my oldest was 3 mo. When the officiant asked if there were any objections, our daughter whined loudly and started crying right after. Timing couldn't have been any more perfect. Officiant replied too late. Everyone was cracking up. Honestly the best part of our wedding video. LOL. Slightly unrelated, but I think I read somewhere on Reddit that the objection part of the ceremony was never meant to be about she should be with me instead or you'll never be as happy with her as you were with me. Its inclusion is so if anyone knows of a legal reason that the marriage cannot be valid. One of them is already married, the bride isn't a virgin, bride and groom are siblings, etc. They have the opportunity to say so before the marriage is allowed and thus prevent any martial sins from taking place. At an anime con a few years back in Ohio, the smaller of the two had the Hyatt as a clue. At the same time there was a wedding in one of the unrented ballrooms. The bride had a freak out and ended up having sex with a Batman cosplayer, Dark Knight version to be specific. I mean, it's more understandable than shagging bat nipples. It's not exactly what you asked, but I was once at an engagement party where the groom-to-be tried to make out with his fiance's best friend. Screaming and crying and threats of violence ensued. Technically they were only engaged for the first half of their engagement party. One of my oldest friends is getting married this evening and I am one of her bridesmaids. It's going to take everything I have not to object. I and all of our friends, and seemingly even her parents, can't stand her husband to be. He's a massive tool and nobody can understand what she sees in him. He's not abusive or anything, just relentlessly triggered and annoying. He's like the sheltered homeschool kid who enters the real world at age 21 and tries to adapt by acting all street. He vapes indoors and makes rape jokes and quotes things even 4chan would find 3 edgy 5 me. The real wife busted the doors open and screams at the top of her lungs, "I am the real legal wife, stop the wedding." Still the reception was continued. I was at the one wedding where the bride had only known the groom for what seemed like a day. They didn't seem like a good match. She was a good few feet taller than him, and it looked like it wouldn't work. Anyway, there at the altar, the priest says his line and this dude and his mate comes running and shouting he objects and confesses his love to the bride. The groom's buddies get a bit physical and a fight breaks out. Long story short, groom gets eaten by a dragon and the bride turns into an ogre and they live in a swamp now with their 3 kids, so I guess it all worked out for them. You got me good. Glad you asked. I try to tell this story to everyone I can. My cousin had a rather extravagant wedding at an upscale golf course. I didn't really want to go because I knew he had hooked up with a friend in our group after he was engaged to the bride. But family pressure and an open bar persuaded me and I'm dang glad I went. I knew it was going to be good when our friend he cheated with was there. He's not the smartest man. Anyway, we have a few drinks at the bar and head to our seats for the ceremony. Apparently they hit her pretty hard because at the moment of truth she yells, "I object, your honor. That man's dong is too small to satisfy. He is unfit for marriage," like it was a goddamn court case. Everyone went silent for a second, and then I looked over at my buddy and we burst out laughing our asses off. Bride was slapped groom. They both cried, but after a brief break and conversation they decided to go through with it, and surprisingly they're getting divorced after a solid 2-year marriage. I like how you called it a solid 2-year marriage. I've posted this before. I objected to my friend getting married during the ceremony. We were at the Whitechapel in Vegas with friends and I had been drinking, so she just laughed it off. Well, she told me later she should have listened because he ended up back in prison. She's now with a good guy, but was having to do the whole back and forth to jail and then putting money on his books. I technically didn't go but was involved. My cousin was marrying a man she knew a total of 4 months and everyone on both sides objected. They went ahead with it anyway and just went to the courthouse. Total length of the relationship, 1 year. Had a wedding interrupted because the bride was already married in 3 different states, with 3 different names, and 5 kids. Not exactly an objection, but I worked as a photographer at a wedding chapel on the Vegas Strip. We had a young Chinese couple come in with their friends and get married. The minister did his normal speech, but when it came down to the vows I could tell something was wrong. The groom kept putting the ring on the bride's finger and taking it off hesitantly. This went on for a few uncomfortable minutes. At one point the groom asked the bride if there was someone else and she nodded her head. After a couple more awkward moments the minister explained that if he did not pronounce them man and wife it wouldn't be legal. They decided not to get married. Their friends still bought the DVD though. That was one of my favorite moments working there. I remember it like it was yesterday. Everyone had gathered in a tight bunch. There were birds nesting in the nearby trees, watching with beady eyes. There were cries of kiss, kiss, kiss. It truly was a joyful occasion. Then there was this guy who called himself the school principal burst through the crowd in a suit and demanded for the whole thing to be called off, spouting things such as peer pressure and who was in charge of this. On hearing this, well, the crowd ran like heck, closely followed by the bride and groom. Primary school weddings. Bruh. My aunt's wedding. Groom's mother shouted that she objects and I immediately stood up and objected her objection in dramatic fashion. Peas. She objected because now the flow of money isn't to her anymore. I was at this wedding and everything was going good so far, but we noticed this creepy guy sort of hanging out outside the church. We ignored him and thought he'd gone and the ceremony started. The bride and groom were saying their vows, but then this same creep just bursts in and starts saying they can't get married because the bride is a W and starts shouting about how the goddamn door should be closed. He was dressed really weirdly as well. Who the frick wears a black top hat and red jacket to go crash a wedding? Had me going in the first half, not gonna lie. I've been to plenty of weddings and never heard the if anyone objects, speak now or forever hold your peace. I think it's something that exists mostly in movies. I've attended 3 weddings and I've heard it all 3. Where I'm from the objection was generally included because if you didn't have a genealogist in your family, you could have accidentally gotten married to a cousin. Nowadays nearly every family from the area has a family tree posted online so you can check before you start dating. The objector, I don't know the proper term, was in fact 7 months pregnant with the groom's child. Happened to be the bride's cousin. I went to a wedding where the entire crowd laughed wildly when the question was asked, but they didn't actually object. The bride and groom had both led, colorful lives. Bride's sister and cousin both objected because the bride was freaking around, and continued to do so a few weeks before the wedding. It was done the day before the wedding though and not during. They forced the bride to confess and she did. Naturally there was no wedding the next day. From the outside, they did look like a good couple though. A random kid burst into the chapel and screamed objection before getting distracted by bubbles that someone gave one of the little kids. Spoiler, the kid was me. As people try to escort him out, he passed out cold. He was drunk. Very drunk. I hope this post blows up cause I'm really interested. I wanted to ask the same and I was always interested in what was it like. Even though I don't have a story, I'll contribute a like for this. Went to relative's wedding. Someone. Reason? The lady objectee was the bride's girlfriend who she broke up with because of the wedding, but got pregnant by the groom because of a one drunken nightstand from the recent engagement party. Everything's in shambles because of the very shocking revelation. The costly wedding then got cancelled. I was expecting more of these to be like in Tomodachi Life where one of them asks one out and then another 2 ask them as well so they have to choose. Flies in through a stage wire above you wait. A guy objected my aunt's wedding saying that she was overweight and he was as thin as a stick. Both not true. My aunt is really strong and is 5'11" while her boyfriend works out a lot more and is 6'0". Not an objection, but at my dad's cousin's wedding the best man screamed and fell to the floor unconscious right as they were about to exchange rings and was rushed to the hospital. Turns out he had a heart attack. He's fine now and recovered quickly. I wanted to object. People are like he's so great and I'm thinking he took money I was handing to a homeless person away from them. Well, I was like 3 so my sisters retold it to me. So during the objection part someone my family didn't know said that had an affair 3 months into the couple's relationship. The wedding happened 1 month after according to my sisters. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.